During World War II, there was a planting secret so effective that gardens using it produced 5 times more food than gardens planted in rows. No irrigation systems, no fertilizer purchases, no daily watering, just mounds of dirt arranged in a pattern that Native Americans had perfected over 5,000 years. Gardens built with these mounds survived droughts that killed row-planted vegetables. Families using this method grew enough food on 1/10 the space. Victory gardeners who learned the technique produced more with a single watering per week than their neighbors produced watering every single day. The secret wasn't special seeds. It wasn't better soil. It wasn't luck or climate. It was understanding that rows are designed for tractors, not for plants. And for 80 years, this knowledge has been systematically erased. Not because mound planting stopped working, because it threatened an irrigation industry worth $9 billion, because you cannot sell drip systems to gardeners who don't need water, because you cannot sell fertilizer to mounds that feed themselves. Today, agricultural companies don't want you to know this method exists, but the truth can't stay buried forever. If you're new here, this channel exposes forgotten growing methods that powerful industries spend billions suppressing, the techniques that eliminate purchased inputs, the systems that create abundance instead of dependency. Hit subscribe right now. Turn on notifications. Share this with everyone still planting in wasteful rows. Let's get into it. Number 1, the Three Sisters Foundation. In 1943, a USDA researcher named Thomas Whitaker was investigating why certain victory gardens massively outproduced others. The answer traced back to gardeners who had learned something from their Native American neighbors, the Three Sisters. For over 5,000 years, indigenous peoples across the Americas planted corn, beans, and squash together in mounds. Not in separate rows, not in isolated patches. Together, in a system so sophisticated that modern science is still discovering why it works. The corn grows tall and provides a living trellis for the beans. No stakes to buy, no supports to build. The structure grows itself. The beans fix nitrogen from air and feed it directly to the corn. No fertilizer to purchase, no annual applications. The plants feed each other. The squash spreads across the ground between mounds, shading soil with massive leaves. No mulch to buy, no cultivation needed. The living canopy prevents evaporation and suppresses weeds simultaneously. 3 plants, 0 purchased inputs, 5 times the yield of monoculture rows. Whitaker measured the results and couldn't believe them. Mound gardens produced 20 to 25 pounds of food per square foot of growing season. Row gardens produced 4 to 5 pounds. The same seeds, the same soil, the same climate, 5 times the food from the same space. But here's what really threatened the agricultural industry. The Three Sisters mounds used 80 to 90% less water than row plantings. The squash leaves blocked sun from reaching soil. Water that would have evaporated stayed locked in the ground. Gardeners who watered once per week harvested more than gardeners who watered daily. After the war, the irrigation industry needed this knowledge buried. Sprinkler manufacturers couldn't sell systems to gardeners who didn't need water. Hose companies couldn't sell products that wouldn't be used. The entire lawn and garden water industry depended on inefficient planting methods that required constant irrigation. So they erased the mounds. They promoted rows. They made indigenous agriculture seem primitive and unscientific. And they sold billions of dollars in irrigation equipment to solve a problem that proper planting would have prevented. Number 2, the mound construction method. The physical structure of the mound is what makes the system work. World War II. Victory gardeners who copied the shape without understanding the engineering failed. Those who learned the precise construction succeeded beyond anything they'd experienced. Traditional mounds are not just piles of dirt. They are engineered water harvesting systems. The base is excavated 6 to 8 inches deep and 18 to 24 inches in diameter. This creates a bowl that catches rainfall and directs it toward plant roots instead of letting it run away. The excavated soil is mounded in a ring around the bowl's edge, creating a raised planting surface 8 to 12 inches above ground level. Seeds are planted on this raised ring, not in the center depression. The center bowl remains lower than the surrounding ring. When rain falls or water is applied, it collects in the central reservoir. It soaks slowly into the root zone instead of running off or evaporating. This is the opposite of row planting. Rows are raised above surrounding soil, water runs off the sides. Evaporation is maximized by exposing soil to sun and wind. Every drop applied must fight gravity, runoff, and evaporation to reach roots. Mounds capture water and direct it downward. Gravity works for you instead of against you. Evaporation is blocked by squash leaves. 1 gallon applied to a mound does the work of 10 gallons applied to rows. World War II gardeners who understood this engineering built mounds that survived the 1943 drought while row gardens withered. The same rainfall, the same watering restrictions, completely different results. The construction takes more initial effort than digging rows. This is why the garden industry promotes rows. More effort up front means customers want to buy tools. Less effort all season means customers don't need to buy irrigation. The industry would rather sell you a lifetime of watering equipment than teach you to build mounds once. Number 3, the nitrogen cycle. Secret. Beans don't just grow on corn stalks. They actively feed the corn while climbing it. This biological relationship is so valuable that it threatens the entire fertilizer industry. Legumes host bacteria in their root nodules that capture nitrogen from air. The nitrogen is converted to forms that plants can use. This process is called nitrogen fixation, and it's the most valuable chemical reaction in all of agriculture. The Haber-Bosch process that manufactures synthetic nitrogen consumes 1 to 2% of all energy used on Earth. Fertilizer production generates more carbon dioxide than most industries. The environmental cost is staggering. Beans do it for free, using nothing but sunlight and air. In the Three Sisters mound, bean roots grow intertwined with corn roots. The nitrogen that beans fix becomes immediately available to adjacent corn plants. The corn grows faster, produces larger ears, and requires no fertilizer application. World War II, researchers measured nitrogen levels in Three Sisters mounds versus monoculture corn plots. The mounds contained 50 to 100 pounds per acre more available nitrogen, free fertility that appeared from thin air. But it gets better. When bean plants die at season's end, their nitrogen-rich roots decompose in place. This nitrogen becomes available to next year's crop. The mound gets more fertile every year instead of depleting. Corn rows work opposite. Every harvest removes nitrogen. Every year requires more fertilizer to maintain yields. The soil gets poor. The inputs get more expensive. The farmer gets more dependent. The fertilizer industry generates $242 billion annually. Every Three Sisters mound planted is fertilizer that doesn't get sold. Every gardener who learns this technique is a customer lost forever. After the war, agricultural schools stopped teaching intercropping. They promoted monocultures that require purchased inputs. They called indigenous methods primitive, while selling products that indigenous methods made unnecessary. The beans still fix nitrogen. The corn still grows without fertilizer. The knowledge remains buried because someone profits from your dependency. Number 4, the living mulch system. Squash leaves can reach 24 inches in diameter. A single squash plant can spread 10 feet in every direction. This aggressive growth isn't a bug. It's the most important feature of the entire system. The squash canopy creates living mulch that does what purchased mulch only approximates. Soil temperature under squash leaves stays 10 to 20 degrees cooler than exposed soil. Roots function better in cool soil. Plants stress less. Water requirements drop dramatically. Light cannot reach the soil surface. Weed seeds cannot germinate without light. Gardeners who grow squash in the Three Sisters system report zero weeding all season. The squash does the work that herbicides and cultivation supposedly require. Water cannot evaporate from shaded soil. Every drop applied stays in the ground instead of disappearing into air. Irrigation requirements fall 80 to 90% compared to exposed row plantings. But squash does something that no purchased mulch can match. It produces food while mulching. One squash plant yields 10 to 30 pounds of food over a season. This food is a bonus on top of the corn and beans. The mulch feeds the family while protecting the soil. Wood mulch costs $30 to $50 per cubic yard. It requires replacement every year. It produces nothing edible. It's a product designed to extract money. Squash costs pennies per seed. It replaces itself through saved seeds. It produces food worth far more than purchased mulch ever could, and it works better at every function. The mulch industry couldn't allow this comparison to spread. After the war, they promoted wood chips and bark as essential garden inputs. They never mentioned that a 10-cent squash seed does everything their products do while producing 20 pounds of food. The squash still grows massive leaves. It still shades soil better than purchased mulch. It still produces food while protecting roots. And the mulch industry still hopes you never figure this out. Number 5, the pest confusion effect. Monoculture rows are pest buffets, hundreds of identical plants lined up in easy-to-find arrangements. Insects locate their target crop and multiply without resistance. Disease spreads from plant to plant without interruption. The Three Sisters mound creates confusion that pests cannot navigate. Corn, beans, and squash smell different. They look different. They occupy different vertical spaces. An insect searching for corn finds beans. A pest looking for squash finds corn. The mixed signals disrupt the chemical and visual cues that pests use to locate food. World War II entomologists documented 60 to 80% lower pest pressure in Three Sisters plantings compared to monocultures, not from pesticides, not from resistant varieties, just from confusing insects with diversity. But the squash adds another weapon. Squash leaves are covered with tiny spines called trichomes. These spines irritate soft-bodied insects. Squash beetles tolerate them, but most other pests avoid squash plants entirely. When squash spreads between corn and beans, it creates a barrier that ground-dwelling pests won't cross. Insects that would walk between corn rows cannot navigate the prickly squash jungle. The plants protect each other. The pesticide industry generates $84 billion annually. Every Three Sisters garden is pesticide that doesn't get sold. Every intercropping system is a customer who doesn't need their products. After the war, chemical companies promoted monocultures that required their products to survive. They funded research on pesticide-dependent systems. They made diversity seem inefficient while selling poison to solve problems diversity prevents. The confusion effect still works. Pests still get lost in mixed plantings. The pesticide industry just hopes you never try it. Number 6, the vertical space multiplication. Row planting uses only ground level. Plants compete for the same horizontal space. Production is limited to what can fit in a single layer. The Three Sisters mound uses 3 vertical layers simultaneously. Triple the production from the same ground footprint. Corn occupies the upper layer, capturing sunlight above everything else. Beans occupy the middle layer, climbing corn stalks to reach light without taking ground space. Squash occupies the ground layer, spreading beneath the vertical crops. One mound might measure 4 feet in diameter. Row planting would fit perhaps 6 plants in that space. The Three Sisters system fits 20 or more plants, producing 3 different crops. World War II. Victory gardeners with tiny urban lots used this vertical stacking to feed families from spaces that seemed impossibly small. 100 square feet of Three Sisters mounds produced as much food as 500 square feet of conventional rows. The yield multiplication threatened seed companies in an unexpected way. Gardeners needed fewer seeds to produce the same food. 1 packet of corn seeds went 5 times further in mounds than in rows. 1 packet of beans lasted multiple seasons instead of 1. The efficiency reduced purchases across the board. After the war, seed companies promoted wide spacing that required more seeds per planting. They printed instructions for row planting that maximized seed use. They never mentioned that closer spacing in mounds produced more food from fewer seeds. The vertical layers still multiply production. The same ground still holds more plants in mounds than rows. Seed companies just hope you keep following their inefficient planting instructions. Number 7, the self-perpetuating system. Here's what terrifies the agricultural industry most. The Three Sisters mound system can continue indefinitely without purchasing anything. Not seeds, not fertilizer, not pesticides, not irrigation equipment, nothing. Corn produces ears that contain next year's seeds. Save them. Beans produce pods that contain next year's seeds. Dry them. Squash produces fruits full of seeds that store until spring. Scoop them. 1 season of Three Sisters provides all seeds needed for next season and the season after, and every season forever. The beans fix nitrogen that feeds next year's corn. No fertilizer purchase needed. The squash suppresses weeds and shades soil. No herbicide or mulch needed. The diversity confuses pests. No pesticide needed. A family that establishes Three Sisters mounds enters a cycle of perpetual food production. They exit the consumer economy entirely. They become producers instead of customers. World War II. Victory gardeners discovered this self-sufficiency by accident. After 2 or 3 seasons, they realized they weren't buying anything anymore. Seeds came from last year's harvest. Fertility came from beans. Pest control came from diversity. Water came from efficient mound design. The agricultural industry saw existential threat. Seed companies need annual purchases to survive. Fertilizer companies need depleted soils that require inputs. Pesticide companies need pest problems to solve. Irrigation companies need inefficient methods that waste water. The Three Sisters mound eliminates all of them simultaneously. After the war, every sector of agricultural industry worked to bury this knowledge. They promoted hybrid seeds that don't reproduce true. They promoted monocultures that require fertilizer. They promoted rows that require irrigation. They rebuilt dependency 1 product at a time. For 80 years, they've been winning. Home gardeners buy seeds every year instead of saving them. They buy fertilizer instead of growing beans. They buy pesticides instead of intercropping. They buy irrigation systems instead of building mounds. But the system hasn't changed. Corn still produces seeds. Beans still fix nitrogen. Squash still shades soil. The perpetual cycle still works exactly as it did for 5,000 years before industry decided you should be a customer instead of a producer. These weren't just planting techniques. They were food sovereignty strategies developed by civilizations that thrived for millennia without purchasing anything. No garden centers, no fertilizer dealers, no irrigation supply houses, just mounds, seeds, and the knowledge to combine them correctly. And here's what the agricultural industry doesn't want you to understand. These methods aren't primitive, they're superior. A garden built on Three Sisters mounds survives droughts that kill conventional gardens. A family with self-perpetuating food systems has security when supply chains collapse. Our ancestors fed themselves for 5,000 years. We can survive only until the next trip to the garden center. Modern agriculture erased mound planting because erasure made corporations money. Every efficient technique forgotten is a product sold. Every gardener dependent on purchases is a permanent customer. The industry profits from your ignorance of what worked before they existed. For 80 years, they've been winning. Gardens have become more dependent on inputs. Yields have declined relative to inputs applied. Food production has become something you buy instead of something you do. But knowledge can't be killed forever. Mounds still harvest water. Beans still fix nitrogen. Squash still suppresses weeds. The system that fed civilizations for 5,000 years still works exactly as it always has. The next time drought strikes, two kinds of gardeners will exist. Those watching row gardens die because they can't afford to water, and those harvesting from mounds that never needed much water to begin with. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe now. Share this with everyone still planting in rows. Because the mounds your ancestors built are still the gardens that work. Build one mound this spring, plant corn, beans, and squash together. Watch what happens when you stop fighting nature and start working with it. I'll see you in the next video.